Okay, I think it is on. We are ready to go. Welcome everyone to this information session, this learning session, as we talk about heart-led landscape painting. I started using the word heart-led a year or two ago. We'd been talking about being a fearless artist, about creating authentic art, showing who we are in our art. Creating loose watercolor was the very first phrase that I used to kind of describe this journey, and yet loose is kind of a bad word because it's a word that falls short because it doesn't really get us to where we really want to go, to our final destination. If we can say there's a final destination, loose. So often you'll hear people say, "I'm trying to be looser," and I feel like trying gives us the wrong impression. I'm just going to work really hard at being loose. And when we start talking about being heart-led, we start to get a little bit closer to the definition of what we're trying to achieve here. It very likely will fall in the category of loosening up in your painting process, but the outcome, the result, is going to be uniquely yours. So I'm really excited that you're all joining me today. We have about 200 viewers right now from all over the world, and thank you to those of you who had to get up early this morning to join us, or are staying up past your bedtime to be here. And as you've talked in the chat, I'm seeing beautiful locations all over the world. Landscape painting for all of us is often very much about where we live and our own unique perspective of place. And even when I travel, how I process a new place is connected to what I know about my home and how I process the changes, the differences, the things I noticed. Something that was really interesting for me a few years ago is when my husband and I took his parents into the mountains here in northern British Columbia, where I live. It's not a far drive to get to the northern Rocky Mountains. And my husband's parents, my in-laws, are from Saskatchewan, famed for its flat, open prairies. And it was actually several hours into our trip before they were even able to start noticing the beauty of the mountains. At first, it was so foreign to their viewpoint. They were fixed on noticing the vegetation more because, of course, that's something you would pay attention to in the prairies. They noticed the sky. Those were things that were within their familiarity of experience. And then as they spent time in the mountains with us, then they started to actually see the things, the majesty of the mountains around them, the scope and the scale of what they were observing. And, the more time we spent there, the more we start to notice the different subtleties in the landscape. So I just think that's such a cool thing. I often think that if I were to move into a new region of the world, a new country, the very first thing I would want to do is spend time painting my new surroundings. It's a way of developing your love for a place, of learning to observe, and to get connected to what you see. And so I think landscape painting is a great way to do that. And so I'm excited that we're going to talk about that today. As we get started, I want to encourage you to feel free to ask questions in the chat. My assistant Robin is here, and I'm just so thankful to have her. I can focus on sharing from my notes and my experiences while she pays attention to any questions you might have. If you're having technical issues, obviously if you can't hear me, this isn't going to help you. But if you're having any kind of technical issues, very often the very first thing to do is just reload the page, refresh your browser, and that usually fixes the issues. We will just fingers crossed that the internet behaves itself, as that's always the risk of a live broadcast. I am talking about a course that I have, a watercolor course designed to help you paint heart-led landscapes, and we're going to be sharing that today. But I'm not just going back to my notes here. It's we're going to give you lots of good content to help you as even if you're not able to take the course or interested in joining us. So hang on here. We're going to talk about the new course and how you can join. I'm going to also show you how you can use a 3-stage development process, or actually how I use that 3-stage development process to create my most authentic landscape watercolor paintings. I really feel like I'm not a natural landscape painter. It's something I've always wanted to do. And if I had been more prepared, I would show you some of my very first landscape paintings. They are terrible. And, for 25 years, I've been trying to figure out how to paint landscapes to look like me. And it took a long time. I very much was bound up in trying to copy the reference photo and then feeling frustrated when it would inevitably fall short. It's impossible for me to paint like a camera. It just is. And yet that's what I tried to do for many years. And if you're trying to do that as well and feeling frustrated, sometimes you just need someone to come and break those chains and help you feel free to paint landscapes in your way. Now, today's lesson is not a painting lesson, so you don't need to get out your brushes, although you might want to have a pen to take some notes. We're going to be working on the inner artist, the mindset stuff, the heart and mind work that gets revealed by our paintbrush. Our paintbrush in watercolor, we talk about watercolor being transparent. It's not just transparent in that we're putting sheer layers of color on the paper, but it's transparent because it shows what we're feeling and thinking. I can't tell you how, in looking at thousands of watercolor paintings over the years and teaching thousands of students, I've really learned that I can see the mindset of my students and of myself when I'm looking at the finished artwork. I can see the areas where hesitation and doubt crept in. I can see the areas that were painted in sheer joy of the process and enjoyment and freedom. And that's where we want to go. That's why it's so important to paint from the heart. And it's also why painting can feel so hard. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. And you know what? You're going to have to bear with me. This is live video. I'm going to run across to the other side of the studio and grab some of those early paintings. I think they're over there, and I would really love to show them to you. Bear with me just for a second here. See, this is me confessing all my failings and flaws. I have to show you, this little binder holds artwork that I've been making since I was a teenager, and some of my very first watercolor paintings. Let's see if I can pull out a good example of some of what I was doing back when I first learned to paint in around 1995. I was very proud of this little piece right here. Try to do it nice and level there. This little barn. And yet now when I look at it, I can see how simplistic it was. I can see how really what's the word? My brush strokes felt like they were a little bit directionless. I didn't really know why I was putting each stroke down on the paper. I was really proud of this painting because it had that nice, the barn actually had form and depth. It didn't just look like a flat pasted cutout. And so that was a leap forward for me. But I can see those directionless strokes, that feeling of not really being sure what I was doing in these little studies. And you can see this is more buildings and barns, and those trees are just kind of little blobby patches. And so when I look at those, I don't have to feel embarrassed about showing you that stuff, because it shows how that growth happens if you are persistent and don't give up. And that is really what I've learned in these many years of painting. Now, I'm a self-taught artist. Those first paintings were done in an 8-week course where I went to the art gallery once a week in the evening for 2 hours. I learned the basics of watercolor, and then I went home and I implemented. I had to figure out now how to take the information I was getting from my instructor and to put it on the paper. And the instructor I had was a marvelous woman from my community, and I was really blessed to be kind of grandmothered by all the other students in the class too. I was the one of the only teenagers there. I think there was two of us, and so they were just so welcoming to these young girls who wanted to learn watercolor, and their encouragement was a big part of what helped me grow. Feeling encouraged in the process is really powerful. Now, as I want to show you a few of the paintings that I've been making lately, and that involves switching this camera over to my work surface. So here's a few things that I was sorting in the studio yesterday, and these were a few that I set aside as being paintings that I could call finished and take out of that work in progress, I don't know what to do with this painting pile. And let's just take a closer look. Now, the neat thing about Heartland painting is what thrills me and makes me feel like I can call this painting complete isn't necessarily going to move the needle for you. This painting might feel unfinished to you. It might feel too simple. And that is okay, because when we're talking about Heartland painting, the ultimate standard of whether a painting works or not has to lie with the artist. So I can show you these paintings because I feel like they say something about me that I'm proud to share. And if you don't understand it, well, I guess you're just not my kind of person. I don't know. No, it's okay. We're all different, and that's what makes us diverse, and that's what makes our world so exciting. So yeah, here's one. And you can see, actually, I pulled these out together because they're kind of related to each other. These simple vertical trees are something I've painted over and over and over again. And we're going to talk about the value of repetition later in the information session here. This little guy I just thought was pretty special. Let's put him on a white background so we can see him by himself. This was an experiment using I think it was like a watercolor crayon on Yupo paper, which is a plastic paper. And I just found it in the studio kind of kicking around the other day. And I just thought, I still really like this simple little doodle. It makes me happy. So I put my name on it. Another one that was created recently, this is kind of an abstract landscape. I see a tree, I see tree roots, but I don't have to define everything about it. I also had an amazing time putting this shimmery gold powder working it as a paint in my painting. And that is a watercolor powder made by Schminke. It's called Schminke Aqua Bronze. If you're addicted to sparkly things like I am and want to try it out, it's a beautiful, beautiful medium. And then this one's kind of a shot in the face of color, isn't it? This was painted out of a desire to capture that immediate impact and attraction in that backlit sunshine streaming through the trees, casting those beautiful purple shadows, water flowing down the middle. This is a place I walk past on my daily walks, and it looks nothing like it, but it captures a little bit of that feeling of that beautiful clear air in the morning, and the joy I feel in just observing that spot every day in all of the different moods that are created depending on the weather. And then finally, this one was something I actually painted as part of a lesson for my Fearless Artist community, which is my membership site where students access 25 of my online courses and ongoing live lessons. And that's happening all year round. So we'll be talking about that just briefly towards the end of the lesson. And I love this little simplified river scene because I liked how it brought out the texture of the paint. This is a lot of hematite burnt scarlet in this painting. Beautiful color made by Daniel Smith, and some gorgeous textures that kind of flow softly between the cliff here and the water. And I kind of liked how everything kind of blurred together in a simplified way and just helped everything in the scene kind of fit together without it needing to be kind of cut and pasted and mishmashed together. I don't know. It just feels right to me. And I have several versions of this, and this is still my favorite. So those are some of the landscapes I've been working on lately, and I wanted to show them to you because they are such a representation of who I am as an artist. And so again, I get to feel proud of them because they show my viewer, who I am and how I feel about the landscape I inhabit. And that's really for me what landscape painting is all about. Um, I I'm going to go back to my notes because I'm losing my train of thought. Okay, so that's a little look at the very beginning of my watercolor journey and not the end, the most recent part of that process. And I use the term journey. I know it's cliche, but it's the only way to describe this process of learning art and learning to express yourself, because everything builds on everything else. The paintings I did 25 years ago have made me the painter that I am today, and I'm so thankful for that. I've been teaching online since 2013, and that's a long time in internet years, 7 years. And over the years, I started out kind of doing step-by-step paint like Angela lessons, really demonstrating my process. And I'm totally okay with doing that, because I think there's a place in learning watercolor where following someone else's decision-making process is a really good place to start. When I share what I'm thinking and working through as I paint a painting, then you benefit by starting to understand your own thought process and the decisions you're going to need to make as you design your own paintings. And then as we grow in skill, there comes this time when we start craving more. And for myself as a teacher, the same thing began to happen. I wasn't just satisfied with teaching students how to paint just like me, how to copy this painting. And my focus has really become boldly about principle-based instruction. These are principles that you can apply to fit your learning style, to fit your painting style, and your own intuition and sense of what your inner artist needs. I want to teach students that you can trust your inner artist. You can listen to yourself, to your own guidance, and have an intuition and sense about what you need next and where you want your paintings to go. Principle-based instruction is awesome as well, because it helps, because I'm always thinking when I'm learning something new, okay, how do I apply this so that it works for me? It's working for that artist, but I'm not that artist. I want to take what they're using and find a way to adapt it to suit me. And and for me, that was actually learning to paint landscapes involved taking the principles I use to paint successful florals and adapt them to this process. And so while I'm talking about landscape painting, the principles I'm going to be sharing do apply to any subject. Okay, so let's talk. First, I want to ask you a question because I've been talking for a while here. I'm just curious in the chat, and if some of you have taken watercolor classes online. I know I recognize names here from students who have taken some of my online courses, but I'd love to hear from you. If you've never taken an online course before, I'd love to know that too. Here we are with a very different situation in our world right now, where suddenly we're traveling less, or not at all. We're home much more and have this time to connect on the internet. And it's been an amazing time for me of connecting with fellow watercolor lovers all over the world. And I've been busier than ever before as students shift from a workshop environment, maybe learning in your own community, to now finding learning outlets on the internet. And I've been very privileged to be able to be a part of that through my online courses and my membership community. JD says, my video tutorials have been very helpful. Lori Louise, I know you've taken online classes with me. Lindy, you say you're new and you've been following my YouTube videos. You know, I started teaching on YouTube because I couldn't not share what I was learning in watercolor. My very first YouTube video popped up, I think in 2012. My children were young, and when they would nap or play outside during the afternoon, I would spend time painting. And when I discovered a new principle about watercolor that got me excited, I had to share it with somebody. My kids didn't care, so I started recording YouTube videos, and that led to teaching online courses, and that led to teaching all over the world. I've been able to travel and teach workshops in amazing places and connect with some really amazing artists and manufacturers of watercolor supplies and just make friends everywhere. It's so awesome. I'm so thankful for it, if you can't tell. Okay. Moving back to talking about landscape paintings. What is a heart-led landscape all about, and why would we want to paint a heart-led landscape? Let me just pause and breathe and collect my notes. Oh, here we go. Sorry, my chat froze up, and I was asking you if you've been taking online courses. I wanted to see your answers. I was waiting for it to load. Joanne says, I've taken classes with Angela. Holly says, I've only taken your classes. Heather says, I've never done an online course. Catherine says, I've never taken a watercolor course, and I'm a newbie. Joanne says, I take online courses and in person. So we have this diversity. We get and I think that's so important. We should be learning from a lot of different sources if we want to be diverse in our art practice. And we should be learning from different instructors. And we can apply our learning online and in person. I think an online class has advantages over in-person instruction in some ways, and vice versa. In-person classes, of course, you get a very immediate response when you ask a question. Online, it's not, it's generally there's a bit of a delay. Maybe you have to wait a few days before the instructor gets back to you. Maybe they are not, maybe you're taking a course where there isn't that interactive feedback, and that's good too. That's all right. You can work through stuff privately at home without other students looking over your shoulder. And one thing I really love about online classes is that you can take them at your own pace. And I love being able to do this live video session where we get to interact like this. And I like to make them a part of my interactive courses where we do a live studio session every week. Monica says, I feel like I'm using the wrong hand while painting. She's right-handed because I watch Angela so much and she's left-handed. I am left-handed. I don't apologize for that. Okay, let's talk about heart-led landscapes and why. Why do we paint landscape paintings? And I've talked about this a little bit already, so we're gonna be swift here. Why do we paint landscape paintings? Are we really just trying to paint a good picture of the place that we're seeing? Are we just trying to show what a location looks like as though we're drawing a map in some way? Cameras are so ubiquitous nowadays. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket in the form of their phone, or I know if we counted the cameras in my house, we'd probably have a dozen. We've got, each of the kids have devices, we've got webcams, we've got cell phones, we've got regular traditional cameras, and we are inundated. Yeah, they might take over one day. So we don't have to paint in order to get our scene on paper. We can just take a photograph. It's instant. And I love to think about the early explorers when they were discovering new places or new species of birds or insects. They had to use art in order to do so. The old sailing ships would have an artist on board, or at least have crew members who had been trained to draw botanical renderings of things that they saw, very, very detailed. And nowadays we don't need that. We don't have our artist on tour when we go places, for the purpose of documenting. And rather we get to just take a photo. So in landscape painting, if cameras are so robust and can do so much, how are we still drawn to paint the landscape? What is it that drives us when we could be so quickly satisfied with our cameras? And we're not. And I believe that this is because there's something about art that does more than a camera can do. First of all, if you're here with me today, it's because you love the process of painting. It's fun to paint. We can lose track of time and just fall into our painting and forget where we are. Those are the good painting days. Secondly, we want to express ourselves. Our camera, yes, it can take a photo. It can show what it was like to be there, but it doesn't show what it feels like to be there. Not necessarily. In painting a landscape, we get to show our point of view, not just the camera's point of view and our eye behind it, but we get to show our experience, our emotions about the place, perhaps our memories that are attached to it. A heart-led landscape painting does more than show what we saw, it shares how we feel. It expresses an aspect of our heart's connection to place. And I think this is important to remember because it can free us from the tyranny of the reference photo and from feeling like we need to be a slave to painting just what we see. We want to have freedom. We want to recognize that in painting a landscape, we get to express our feelings about a place, and that should help us recognize that our reference photo is just a tool that you can use to show what you can't say in words. And often what I'll do is when I'm painting the landscape from a reference photo, and I start to feel myself getting kind of tied to that photo, and what does the photo say I need to do next? Always looking at that photo. Sometimes I just put the photo away. I close my eyes and remember, and paint what I remember, because in my memory all of the extra stuff that wasn't important gets stripped away, and I can only paint from my own perspective. What's left is my perspective. In recognizing that in landscape painting we want to communicate, that gives us also a commitment to authenticity. How I paint a scene, like I showed you here a few minutes ago, is going to look different than how you would paint that same scene. Every single landscape painting can be individual and show a unique perspective. And as I paint, I look for what rings true in the painting in that moment. Really itchy nose today. And I commit to seeking it out. I have committed to painting a scene as many times as it takes to find that emotional resonance in my work. And I usually recognize that I try to recognize that usually my first version of a scene is not going to be much more than a copy of what I see. Every time I paint a scene for the first time, I have to figure out what the important stuff is, and my photograph isn't going to tell me that. I have to work through it. It takes commitment and trust to get what I feel down on the paper. Another reason heart-led landscape painting can be important is that we're telling a story, and I love stories. I grew up reading, my mom collected those old readers that would be collections of short stories, and I devoured those. I love stories. And every good story has, beginning, a middle, and an end. They have a climax. They are getting to a point, and they strip away the extraneous. A good writer knows to edit their work, and as artists, I think we need to edit our work as well. Our story has less impact if we feel the need to excessively share peripheral detail. You don't want somebody who rambles on and on about details that don't really matter. And I love reading a book or watching a movie and recognizing a good editor where every little camera angle, every turn of phrase was there for a reason. And I can remember those things and apply them as I work through the story. And as artists, we get to do that too. Just like in telling a good story, it usually gets better with the telling. We learn to refine and pare down the story and improve how we say it. As we pursue the best way to tell the story, we can do that with painting as well. That's repetition to me is really important because it gives me that opportunity to continuously edit my painting and make it stronger. This means also that one painting won't tell the whole story. Sometimes I'm in a place, I love trees, and I've painted them hundreds of times because, each painting shows a little different facet, a tiny detail that has a new impact. If I'm sharing, again with storytelling, if I'm sharing an anecdote about something that's happened in my day, I tailor it to my audience. I'm going to tell a story differently if I'm talking to teenagers than if I'm talking to my grandparents. If I'm talking to a group of artists about a trip, I'm going to talk a lot about the visual aspects of that travel. But if I'm talking to my husband who loves cars, I might be talking more about the road and the vehicle we drove in than what I saw on the way. So we change our story depending on who our audience is. In our paintings, we can show different aspects of the scene and different elements. We don't have to cram everything into one painting. I think I go back to Claude Monet, and I mentioned him in the chat earlier. It's fascinating looking back at his life and his body of work. I was just reading a bit about him today. He painted up into his 80s, and in the last 30 years of his life, he was obsessed with painting water lilies in his garden. Not just painting water lilies, he actually built this garden. He had this army of gardeners who arranged everything just so. I'm probably talking to some of you who've actually been to his garden, which I think is amazing. That's on my bucket list one day. But he was obsessed with painting these water lilies for 30 years. All of the different facets, the different times of day, the different development seasons that happen, that couldn't be done in one painting. He painted them over and over and over again with this feeling of pressure that he wasn't going to get it. And that's fascinating to me. We get to do that in our own work too. We can work in a series because there's more to say than we can express in one painting. And when we work in a series, we often provide more for the audience. Different paintings in the series will speak to viewers in different ways. Finally, a heart-led painting is our chance to ask ourselves a kind of scary question, and that is, who am I and how am I showing myself in my work? Now, have you ever had the question? I think it's the question we all fear when we're in a group of new people. Tell us about yourself. And we're all like, and for me, I can just say I'm an artist, and then that's all they need to know about me. And that's really not all they need to know, is it? I mean, I'm not just an artist. I'm not just a mom. I'm not just, a Canadian. I'm so many more things. I'm obsessed with jelly beans. I sing along with every song that comes on the radio. I love colorful clothes and shoes, and those things make me very happy. I love bats flying outside of my windows. I lived in Papua New Guinea. We could just tell all of these things about ourselves that make us who we are. And then how would you describe your sense of humor? We don't even know how to put that kind of thing into words. So in art, all of those things about our personality, and I just listed a bunch of things that really still aren't who I am. Who I am is not something I know how to express in words. It's the inner part of me that makes me who I am, that gives me the ability to love bats and music and, all of those weird things. To be someone who has the mindset and the sense of humor that I have, the things that we don't know how to articulate, we get to express in our art. And I know you're thinking, I just want to paint pretty paintings, and I'm not really trying to tell people who I am. Well, you are. In art, we always get to talk a little bit about who we are because we're always painting what interests us, what we're fascinated with, and wanting to share that. And sometimes I think our biggest fear in making art is that we believe that we don't really have anything inside of us to share. So often we obsess about focusing on sharing just the technical skills that we've achieved in learning art, showing what we can do, competently depicting what we see. And our art, when we're involved deeply in that pursuit and a little afraid to let ourselves out on the paper, then our art starts missing its heart. And your inner artist needs to feel permission to emerge. And when you don't feel like there's anything there to share, it's only going to peek out in the barest of glimpses. So I want to encourage you, number one, trust that you have amazing things inside of you that will make your art better and more real and true. It's a scary thing to get vulnerable on paper. It's a scary thing to get vulnerable with anybody. And when we do it in our art, it feels really, really personal. But I have seen it happen when you create art that is your most authentic and heart-led work. You become your own favorite artist, you fall in love with your own work, and you connect with other people as well. Okay, so how do I do this? How do I get to the heart of my own landscape paintings? We have 3 keys that you can, these are the things I want you to write down. These are the things that you can write down and apply to help you paint your most authentic work. And if you want help with this, if you're hearing these keys and you need a little more, that's what my course Heart-Led Landscapes is all about, and I'm going to tell you about that as well. Number 1, if you want to get to the heart of landscape paintings and create your most authentic work, we first establish a foundation. We want a strong foundation using strong technique. I've learned that I don't know what I don't know what I don't know when I start a new painting. When I put that brush to paper on that very first version of a new scene, I struggle. I'm going to be a little lost in the weeds. And I recognize that I need to get to know my subject if I want to paint it with honesty and confidence that I know what I want my painting to say. So I need to take time with foundational work. And I want to make that foundational work fun because I don't feel like being bored when I'm painting. So in a spirit of fun and exploration and playful exploration, I study my values, I learn color theory, and I work to choose colors that are powerful for my painting. I learn about composition so that I can create a framework to build my painting on. When I get to know the skeleton of the scene through that preliminary work, those are elements that you can build the meat of your painting around. And so I don't believe in just handing a student a brush and saying, paint what your heart wants you to paint. You need some technical instruction as well. You need that foundational work. So that's number 1. Let's figure out how to build a foundation with strong value contrasts, with impactful colors that influence the mood, and with a composition that leads the eye through the painting to where you want the viewer to go. Number 2 is fill your toolbox. I love to think about my art journey as being a process of developing techniques that fill a toolbox of strategies that I can use in my paintings. When I first learned to paint, I only had a few little things rolling around in that toolbox. I had a little bit of an understanding on how to work with water and paint. I had a little bit of knowledge about wet and wet on dry painting, and dry brush work, and layering and glazing. And over time, that toolbox became much more robust. I started to fill it with strategies, not just on techniques, but on how to paint different subjects. I learned how to paint trees confidently, and that led to learning how to paint foliage and grasses and flowers and rocks and water. And well, I'm still not very good at painting rocks. Got to work on that. And now I'm exploring, and because I learned how to paint those subjects, that gave me confidence to add new subjects to my toolbox. I get to work on learning architecture, and maybe future explorations will involve putting some portrait skills in my toolbox, or animals. I get to build those skills. I also, the techniques I get to add to my toolbox aren't just knowledge that has to do with how much paint and water to use, but about mark making and developing my own style of how I use my brush, learning negative painting and how to apply that in my paintings. As we grow, we recognize that the toolbox starts to fill, and we'll have future strategies that we can bring to future paintings. And I like to recognize this. I like to talk about the toolbox because it's not just filled with techniques, once again, but it's filled with my own decisions about how I'm going to paint different things. So now when I paint trees, I have a default shape that I start with very often, a certain mark making style that I know will work well for my foliage, and I go there first of all. And so it gives us a lot of strategies that we can use and bring with us into our paintings. Another good reason why working in a series can help you fill your toolbox. Number 3, this is really important. This is the key, I think, to heart-led painting and taking those first two elements into that realm of developing your own style and identity. Adapt. Adapt to accommodate the voice of the subject, and repeat to refine and simplify. This is that interplay between the strategy you know and the ability to kind of pivot as the painting evolves and trust your inner artist to come out. Refuse to make assumptions. Generally, we start with a picture in our head of what we want the painting to look like, but if you're willing to hold that fairly loosely and allow the painting to evolve, so often the painting can surprise you in amazing ways. Personally, I have committed to exploring a scene, painting it over and over again, as many times as it takes to get to the heart of what I really want to show in my painting. Often for me, this is a cycle, and I'm going to demonstrate it in Heart-Led Landscapes, my online course, a cycle of experiments, of study and research, of boredom and frustration sometimes, fairly often, and then finally that boredom and frustration often leads to breakthrough as I challenge everything I think I know about the scene and work to make it my own. There's a feeling of incredible excitement and satisfaction in pushing through all of those doubts and fears and boredom and frustration and struggle and problem solving, and then getting to this finished painting and thinking, this one says what I want it to say. And it may be even in a way I didn't expect. And often that feeling is accompanied with, I don't know why I love this painting, but I love it. So does that sound like a path you'd like to go on? Do you want to have those kinds of feelings about your paintings? I really believe that you can. I think we start out in painting with so many doubts, whether we have what it takes. And if you're thinking those thoughts, that's why I teach online, why I've been doing this for so many years. It's really powerful for me to look back over my own journey, which was full of doubt, whether or not I had what it takes, and realize that it was the sheer stubbornness of being me, being too stubborn to quit, that brought me to this place of really loving the art that I was making, and recognizing and having peace with the learning process when things aren't turning out. And I want to encourage you that watercolor for me has been cyclical, in that I learn something new and it's exciting and fresh, and I see great things happening on the paper. And then I can't predict when it's going to happen, but we are wired to grow, to change and challenge ourselves. And so there all of a sudden, whatever was working before feels like it stops working, because my natural growth tendency starts moving me to the next phase of my watercolor journey. And I have to be in that place of learning and frustration and struggle as I bring in new skills, a new skill set, and put it in that toolbox. Anytime you get a new tool in your hand, it feels a little clumsy and awkward until you learn how to use it, and we have to make peace with that learning process. Okay, I'm gonna just switch the camera over. I think it should work for me. I want to tell you a little bit about the course Heart-Led Landscapes. This course, I created it last year, and it was such a great feeling of fulfillment to see in print and in video the principles and techniques that I had seen transform my own landscape painting process, and then to work through it last year for the very first time with a crop of online students and see it transform their own learning process. And so I'm just addicted to seeing that happen, and I can't wait to share it with you as well. So Heart-Led Landscapes is an online course that is available for you to purchase. You get lifetime enrollment to the course. And right now until July 21st, it also comes with a bonus of 1 month membership in my Fearless Artist community. And that's a learning place where fellow watercolor lovers get together in a private paid community developed for that opportunity to interact and share what we're learning in watercolor and learn from each other. I'm there every week. We do online lessons in a live setting just like this. Sometimes we do critique sessions. We have a book club. We do a lot of great stuff. And through July 14th to August 14th, we are going to be focused on Heart-Led Landscapes in Watercolor, this online course, working through the lessons in the course, as well as offering bonus content of these in-studio video sessions with me. You can see there's 4 sessions, one each Tuesday. It is optional to be there for those sessions because I know time zones, that's always a challenge. If you can make it in person, you can ask your questions there or in the Fearless Artist community. You get coaching and feedback on work posted in the community, and there's a lot of other resources there for you as well. It is really such a great way to well, I guess my passion is, I'm just going to switch the camera for a few minutes. I'll bring that screen back in a minute so you can write that link down to enroll. But and actually Robin's posted it in the chat as well, and it's in the description below this video down here. But before we go there, I just wanted to talk a little bit about online courses because they often they have one failing, and that failing is that so often we buy an online course, and I'm guilty of this. We buy an online course and we never actually use it. I'm on day 3 of a 14-day program right now designed to help me be a better writer. Yep, day 3. And I started like 2 months ago, so a little behind. And so we're not good at following through. We think, well, we have this course, it's always available to me. I'll make some time and I'll do it, sometime in the future. And I don't want to see that happen to you. When you buy an online course, there's this vague sense of guilt that I haven't used it yet. I haven't done it. And so doing an interactive series like this, where for a set time period, we are working together through the course, it's the best way to actually see change happen, see that impact in your work, and see those strategies actually implemented in your watercolor journey. I want that for you. And so I love doing these interactive series. So through July 14th to August 14th, we are doing that with Heart-Led Landscapes. What it looks like for you, and actually I think I should be able to show you the actual course page here. Oh, it's not liking me. We'll just bear with me while I find it. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the actual course looks a little bit like this. This is just the index page. We are packed with lessons here. We start out with an introduction and some worksheets for you, reference photos to the demonstrations in the course. It is a principle-based course, so we will be talking about how to choose a good reference photo, how to see and understand value and contrast and their role in your paintings. This was my weakest area for many years. It probably still is my weakest area, but it's a heck of a lot stronger than it was. And I'm always working to grow better in my area of using value and contrast. We talk briefly about perspective. That's something that I was always really terrible at and felt overwhelmed by. I should add that. And I realized that I can learn anything if I just take it in small enough chunks. So we talk about that. We talk about color and using color to establish mood. And then we have a series of demonstrations. We also have some bonus content. We had an intermission where we took a little break to kind of absorb everything that we learned when we went through the first time. And I encourage students to do that anytime you start feeling overwhelmed. Pause, kind of linger over the content. Because we're doing the series as a 4-week interactive does not mean you have to complete the course in 4 weeks. We really just want to establish good habits for a thriving creative practice. Developing a personal artistic language. This is learning how to use shape and fun techniques that are kind of bonus, fun things like using special effects in your watercolor, using brush mark making, and creating your own icon language. And that was one of my favorite parts. Learning how to work in a series, and learning how to create various focal points and simplify your scene. This is all content that we cover in the course. There's a ton of stuff here. We talk about as well the development process where you want to craft your own thriving creative practice. It is no good if you walk away from the course and go back to doing everything the way you always did it. It's about adding in new habits to help you stay encouraged and grow, to trust yourself more and to really let yourself be a little bit weird and wild on your paintings. I love letting my inner weird out onto my papers because I can't always do that in social settings or, in places where I go, but I can always know that I'm safe in my studio to be the artist I want to be, even when that artist is maybe a little bit strange. I'm going to take a look at your questions here. I want to just encourage you, if you feel like this course is a fit for you, now is a really good time to join. Not just because you get the accountability of going through the course for 4 weeks with us, but you also get that free month in my Fearless Artist community. It's a really good place to kind of take a look and see if that community is a fit for you. I created the Fearless Artist community as a way to provide students access to 25 online courses. I've made a lot of courses over the last 7 years, and they are almost all there with the exception of Watercolor Mastery, which is another course that we do as an interactive series just once a year. So we will be going through the course during the month, starting in July 14th, right through till August 14th. You can sign up for Heart-Led Landscapes anytime, but now is a really good time to join because you do get that bonus coupon for the Fearless Artist community and the interactive growth that happens when you work in a group. The feedback students get on their paintings offers this whole additional aspect of growth in learning because students will post a painting in the community. Other students will engage and offer some advice if you're struggling and insights that you might not have thought of. I'll show up there and offer also coaching as well. And so then we get to talk about the actual real life problems that are happening as you go through the lessons. You see the things you might be struggling with or confused by, and we get to talk about those during the course. So it's a great time to join. I know you have questions. I'm going to pop that little window up for just a moment again, and then I'm going to take a look at the chat and see what we've got there. Robin's been answering them here in the chat, but I'm very happy to take on anything that maybe she's not sure about and let you know how that all works. I see some questions about the Fearless Artist course bundle, so I'm going to talk about the difference between those two in just a moment. I see there's also some questions about whether or not this course is good for brand new beginners. First of all, I would encourage you to, if you're brand new to watercolor, your main goal right now is just logging those brush miles. Put the time in to really get a feel for watercolor. That can only happen over time. And all the reading you do, all the videos you watch are going to give you a lot of information, but you have to internalize it by investing your time. And I have a great course to help you with that as well, which is Learn Watercolor the Heart-Led Way. I have not seen another online beginner course for watercolor that approaches it in this kind of heart-led paint for the joy and learn technique as you go kind of approach. Generally, beginner courses are pretty dry with just starting with, these are the techniques and these are how to use them. And we go a little bit off the beaten path by getting really playful with learning those techniques. Okay. Heather says, if I can't participate on Tuesdays, will that be a problem? Not at all. You can watch the live studio session when it's convenient for you. They're always available as replays in the community. Actually, not only that, but in the community, we actually offer replays to all of the live sessions I've done over the past year. So there's a lot of content in that community just for those of you who are joining for the month of the course. You can easily be overwhelmed. Don't go there. Take your time. Learning watercolor is a long journey, and we have to make peace with that and learn one small chunk at a time. I'm seeing questions about, okay, so this is the part that I feel like we always want to try to make as clear as possible, and that is, what's the difference between Heart-Led Landscapes and the Fearless Artists community? So let's go there. When I first started teaching online, I was creating individual courses. You would buy them one at a time and own them forever. And over time, I developed 25 courses, and there's more being added. And, I don't want to sell 25 different things. That's confusing for all of us. Which one is the right one for me? Who knows? So I decided the best way to offer all of those courses in a way that's very clear for everyone was to bundle them together into a group and make that available on a monthly basis. So we started the Fearless Artist membership. And in addition to those 25 online courses, we added in the community site where you can take the learning that you're doing in those courses and talk about it in our community, as well as join in with those online live classes. And so those are always available in the Fearless Artist community membership. And with your membership, you get to be a part of our little group that learns together every single week. And it's a special place. It's, I think, the most supportive place for watercolor on the internet. And because it's not open to the public, we only have the really dedicated students who are passionate about pursuing this heart-led learning style. And I think that's one reason it's such a supportive and close-knit group. And I'm seeing comments about students who are feeling the same way, who have been members of the community for some time and are growing as independent artists. I think it's very rare that we see courses offered for students who are getting beyond kind of the basics and are wanting to do more with self-expression, with crafting a more confident studio practice. And I love to be able to offer that through our Fearless Artist membership. And Heart-Led Landscapes is a really good place to start. So we have the individual course Heart-Led Landscapes with the bonus of the Fearless Artist community. And then if you're feeling like you might want to just dive in with both feet, the Fearless Artist membership is a great place for you. Take your time, read through the content. I'll be sharing some emails as well over the next few days, just talking a little bit more to answer your questions. And so, anything that I haven't covered here, hopefully I should be covering in those emails. Now, I know they had some FAQs written down here. Gina says, I'm enrolled in the beginner Heart-Led watercolor course. Which course would you recommend next? That is a great question, Gina. And generally, I pass the buck when I'm asked that question, and I tell my students, I tell you, you probably have a good idea of what the next thing should be for you. Generally, what I feel like is we can trust our instincts pretty well on what we need. I've seen it happen for me over and over again, where what I needed to learn at that time kind of revealed itself to me. When I was ready to learn more about color theory, all of a sudden there was this wealth of information that I accessed through different workshops that I took, through different books I was reading, through my research online, through my own experiments in the studio. So I trust that, if you're going through my course catalog at learn.angelafair.com and you see a course that you think, maybe that would be the next thing for me, trust it. Your instincts are usually pretty spot on. And so I would really encourage you to trust that. If there's something in your heart that's kind of resonating with this, you have to go there. And there's usually going to be a little fear there too. That fear of inadequacy, that imposter syndrome that shows up, totally okay. We all feel it. It never goes away, but we learn how to live with it and maybe dampen it down a little bit in favor of trusting ourselves just a little bit more. And I think that's the best thing that we can learn through creating art, is that ability to pause, to look inward, and to trust ourselves. Heather asks, how long do you have to complete the course? If you enroll in Heart-Led Landscapes, you get lifetime access to that online course. It does not go away. You can take decades if you want to. As long as the internet's still around, we will have that course there for you. But if we do have the interactive series, goes for 4 weeks. And so I would encourage you to take the time to go through the bulk of the lessons then, and then give yourself time to kind of internalize the onslaught of information that you'll be going through during that time period. Generally, anytime you're taking a course, it's a lot of information that we take in, and then we process it slowly over time. I also have to mention as well, those of you who have purchased Heart-Led Landscapes in the past, you are totally welcome to join us again this time. We love having past students in the course again, and it so often happens that you'll see previous students in the course talking about what they learned the first time, which really helps to supplement the course and building on their growth from the previous go-around. And so you're encouraged to join us. All you have to do for that is join the Fearless Artist community through the month of July and August. So starting July 14th, we'll be doing the first session. So you're welcome to join us and go through that course content as well. We love seeing past students wanting to revisit the course. It's a really good way to evaluate your growth. Shelley says, I've been a little over my head in course choice in the past. Sometimes we do that. We choose a course that's a little advanced for us, but we take in what we're ready to learn. And that's what Shelley says. I learned what I was ready to learn, and the next time through, I learned on another level. And my insight on this is that when you're short, new to learning something, you're just small and your learning is just down low here. And so some things will fly right over your head. But as you grow as an artist, you get a little taller, and those things that were flying over your head start to hit you right here, which is where our brain is located, so that's good. They soak in, and then they have to come down into our heart so that we really get ownership of that information. It takes time. And then when we own that information, it comes out our fingers. Doesn't that sound magical? I love that visual. I just love thinking about ideas flying over my head and then blasting me in the forehead and giving them time to come out. I'm a nerd. Okay. Seeing a few more questions and then we're going to wrap up here. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I know you're here because your passion is to grow your skills and do more with your art than just copy your reference photo. And I am right here to help you and encourage you in that. You can do it. I didn't know if I could when I started. I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm really excited about the place I am now. I found my way through those weeds, through that dark forest of unknowingness. And it was probably not the most direct route. Creativity never is. It's not efficient. But all the things I learned along the way are so valuable, and I love adding them to my watercolor process. Okay, finally, questions. Just a few more questions. Marga says, are all the subjects open from the beginning of the course and everybody goes through it at their own pace? Yes. We originally, when we launched the course, we dripped everything out week by week, but this time everything's just wide open. You can go through the course at your own pace. If you're one of those people who likes to bounce around from different subjects, well, I do like the structure of going through one thing at a time from top to bottom on the list, but you can do it your own way. You want to make your learning work for you. And so we have the course content wide open for you to learn quickly or slowly, whatever you'd like to do. Lori Louise says, I've gotten such value from watching your free YouTube videos repeatedly, so I'm thinking owning the course is a good idea for me in order to watch as many times as I want for as long as I want. Yes, I agree with that. I think so often when we're going through new information, we're going to miss things, and it's really beneficial to go back. And again, you're a little taller, so some of that information hits you in the brain. And so that's really why I like having a course where you have access to it all the time. Absolutely. Okay. Oh, Barb says, I'm considering Italy with you. You know, I am going to be teaching. We have rescheduled my Italy workshop for October of 2021. I am hoping that we will be able to resume travel by then, and looking forward to teaching more in person workshops in the future. At this point, though, I'm so glad that I get to teach online and have been able, through this time of being at home, still been able to connect with my watercolor community, to learn together, to hear from you, and develop lessons that help you grow where you're at. And that's really what these courses are all about. So I've told you how to join Heart-Led Landscapes. There is a link in the description below the video. I'm going to finally, just one last time, recap those 3 keys that I think are so essential. Number 1, build that foundation. Understand the principles of art so that you can implement them in your way. With strong technique, we get to build on that with our self-expression. Number 2, have a toolbox full of strategies that are yours, things that you take ownership of, your mark making style, your favorite colors, different kind of icon symbols that you use to depict trees or grasses or whatever your subject happens to be. That collection of strategies you will draw on time and time again as you continue your journey. Number 3, adapt. Do not be so tied to that original vision in your head that you can't recognize your own genius as it emerges on the paper and adapt to work that new vision. Trust yourself. That's really what it comes down to. We learn all of that and more in Heart-Led Landscapes. This is a watercolor course. I would love to have you join me and take advantage of this interactive series. You can sign up at learn.angelafair.com. If you sign up before July 21st, 2020, you get access for a month to our Fearless Artist community where the interactive series will be happening. I'd encourage you to do that and join us. If this is resonating for you at all, don't put yourself off any longer. Go for it. Give yourself this vote of confidence and invest in your watercolor journey. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you very soon in the Fearless Artists community and Heart-Led Landscapes. Bye, everybody.